What is success? Success is defined by the Oxford English Dictionary as the accomplishment of an aim or purpose. So if you break that down, it means success has two components. First, you have to set a goal for yourself. And second, you have to actually accomplish that goal. If that's success, then we have to think about what failure is. Failure is considered oftentimes to be the opposite of success. It's defined by the OED as the neglect or omission of expected or required action. It's also defined as a lack or deficiency in a desirable quality. I'm here to talk to you about failure, my failures in particular, and what they mean to be. My first true failure is a two-part story.
No.
In college, I was a coxswain at Brown University on the women's varsity rowing team. So for those of you who don't know about coxswain, because it's not very popular in Nigeria, and rowing is not very popular in Nigeria yet, the coxswain is a combination of a coach, a jockey, a conductor, and a mom. At a bare minimum, the coxswain has to be able to steer the boat straight. We are the only ones facing forward in a 60-foot-long boat, and keep the rowers and equipment safe from harm. To be a good coxswain, you need to be able to follow the coach's orders and make sure that the boat and the rowers in it are doing what he wants you to do. Everything from running drills during practice to executing a race plan during a competition. As a main component of this, you have to be able to count to 10, usually in time with the strokes. And basically, it kind of sounds like this. You go 1, 2, 3, 4. And, you know, it's not that hard, but it can get complicated sometimes, as we'll see. To be a good coxswain, you don't just have to be able to steer, you don't just have to be able to execute the race plan. You have to understand the technical elements of rowing. You have to understand why your rowers are not going fast and be able to correct their individual and collective mistakes to get the boats go faster and to find what we like to call swing. But to be a great coxswain, your rowers have to have absolute faith in you. They have to believe that they can win, and you have to make them believe that they can win. You must be able to draw from them every last ounce of energy on the race course. You have to be able to focus 9 lines on a single goal: victory. I had to say I was a pretty great coxswain until the day that I wasn't. On May 28, 2006, while most of my classmates were walking across the stage just like this one to collect their college diplomas, I was on the starting line of a race against 5 other teams for the NCAA Division I National Championship. We had one objective: beat Cal. If we could do that, the team trophy would be ours for the second time in 2 years. Things started off really well. The first 500 meters of the race, we were up half a boat length up. We felt great, we looked strong, and then the momentum started to shift. By the halfway point, Cal had started to inch down. I was shaken. Doubt crept into my mind, and I couldn't keep it out of my voice. As we battled down the course, I could feel the confidence draining from my rowers. We were still neck and neck with Cal, but our pace was off, and our power was dropping. And then, as we entered the final sprint, I made a mistake. I incorrectly called the last 30 strokes of the race. So remember how you have to count to 10? I thought we only needed 30 more strokes. We needed 40 more strokes to complete the race. This was our championship on the line, and I had failed to do one of the most basic tasks of a coxswain, knowing how far each stroke would carry my boat. My crew valiantly fought through these additional last 10 strokes, and we crossed the finish line in a deadlock with our rivals. But as the photo finish would reveal, we ended up losing to Cal by less than 100th of a second. I was devastated. I was inconsolable. I was 22 years old, and for the first time in my life, I had applied myself 100% and had not been able to achieve my goal. I couldn't look my teammates in the eye. I couldn't let go of the pain of my failure. I no longer believed I was a great coxswain. And this, as it turns out, would soon lead to an even bigger failure. Earlier that spring, I had been invited along with 2 other coxswains to compete for a seat on the U.S. rowing women's national under-23 team. Up until this NCAA championship race, I had been convinced that I would easily beat out the other women and earn my seat on the team. But now, I wasn't so sure. During the 5-week selection process, I second-guessed myself at every turn. I fumbled the coach's directions, I lost sight of my goals. In college, my rule of thumb had always been, don't try to be in the fast boat, try to make the boat fast. What that meant to me was, whoever I was placed with in whatever circumstances, I wanted to get the best and maximize the potential out of everybody that I was working with, rather than trying to determine whether or not the coach thought I was fast and put me with the fast people. I wanted to make the people that I was racing with believe that there was no reason we couldn't be the fast boat. There was no reason we couldn't take that victory. And somehow, over those 5 weeks of selection camps, instead of feeling confident and excited and getting my rowers to feel confident and excited, I just felt panicked and stressed and anxious and exhausted. I started to blame the head coach. After all, he was actually the coach of Cal, for not giving me opportunities. And I started to blame myself for not having what it took. After all, I couldn't even count to 30. I couldn't even correctly call the end of a race. I couldn't even get my people to stay focused on the win. When I didn't make the under-23 national team, I was heartbroken but not surprised. I felt it would have been a foregone conclusion that I would fail. The main question in my mind was, now what? For the last 4 years of my life, I had defined myself first and foremost as a coxswain, as a really great coxswain, an unstoppable coxswain. And now I had been proven wrong twice. I felt less sure about my identity. Who was I? What was I capable of, not this? So let's take a few minutes here to talk about what the failures were that I really encountered. First, we have the obvious blunder. I miscounted the end of the race. I should have called 40 strokes, I called 30 strokes, and panicked I had to call 10 more. Everybody got upset. This was definitely a failure on my part to stick to the race plan. Second, there was the boat's defeat. But if we think about the definition of failure, was this defeat really a failure? Remember, we're defining failure as the neglect or omission of expected or required action. Now, we all wanted to win, but we'd always known this would be a tight race. No one was telling us the victory was mandatory or expected. So my failure had been a contributing factor in our defeat. But that loss itself was not a failure, it was an outcome. So then what was the second failure? The second and more damaging failure that I experienced was actually the way I responded to the first failure. I internalized it. I told myself that not that I could fail to achieve something, but that my action was a proof that I myself was a failure. This is a pretty classic example of what cognitive behavioral therapists like to call absolutism, which is the tendency to interpret one single event in a total or absolute way. Absolute thinking can lead to errors in the way that we judge ourselves because it causes us to spread and draw widespread conclusions from a small and usually ungeneralizable action. It can reduce our ability to cope with difficult and negative situations. So let's think back to that second definition of failure, a lack or deficiency of a desirable quality. Well, having impaired cognitive and coping mechanisms certainly counts as a deficiency of a desirable quality. So the fact that I would have selected for the under-23 national team, that was a huge disappointment, and it was life-altering outcome. If I wouldn't have come to Nigeria if I'd ended up being national team coxswain, for sure. But the true failure was really in the way that I had learned to think about myself. And the thing is, I had actually been an absolute thinker for most of my life. It's just that since I had mostly met with success in all of the major endeavors I'd taken on in childhood and adolescence, all this absolute thinking had created this really monstrous ego inside of me. For example, in 3rd grade, I solved math problems at a 4th grade level. I read at a 7th grade level. Therefore, in my mind, I was clearly brilliant. In high school, I was one of only 4 freshmen to be accepted into our school's elite small chorus. Therefore, I was clearly unimaginably talented in singing. In college, I surpassed 3 older teammates to become the top coxswain on our team, and subsequently won a national championship Therefore, I must be the best possible in the country. These achievements may or may not be objectively oppressive, but I wore them as a second skin. I found myself as an amalgamation of my successes and not really as a person at all. And because I didn't know who I was outside my accomplishments, when I failed to achieve something that I wanted with every single cell of my body, it's not entirely surprising that I did not know how to distinguish myself from that failure. So what about the woman who beat me out and became the coxswain for the under-23 national team? Well, she did go on to become a gold medal winning Olympic athlete, but not until 2016. You see, there's only one coxswain position on the national team, and the incumbent coxswain didn't retire until after she took gold at the 2012 Olympics. So this one-time rival of mine spent 6 years as an understudy, as a backup, learning and competing and staying focused and keeping her eyes on her prize. Did I want that medal so badly that I was going to take my life and put it on hold for 10 years to prep and fight for my place and my chance? And trick the answer is no. I said at the beginning of this talk that I was going to tell you about failure and what it means to me. Failure still means a lot to me. When I'm at my best, I take a critical eye and I try and think about what went wrong. I try to draw out lessons learned so that I can apply them going forward and not fail again, or at least not fail in the same way. When I'm at my worst, I still let absolute thinking get the best of me. I ruminate, I obsess, I internalize. But after years of self-reflection, I've started to see a strange pattern emerge. One that makes how I feel about and how I react to failure with how I feel about and how I react to success. I've started to realize that the more I let go of my attachment to success, the easier it is for me to get over my failures. So what does this mean? When I say I'm letting go of my attachment to success, does that mean I'm not really trying anymore? Does it mean I don't care anymore? No. I'm still highly motivated. I still set ambitious goals for myself. I still work as hard as I can to achieve them. But in parallel, I'm also starting to work hard to define myself separately from those goals and achievements. I'm a reader. I'm an animal lover. I'm a member of a kind and loving family. I have loyal friends. I'm empathetic. I'm resilient. And if I succeed or fail at a given task on a given day, it may affect my mood or it may alter my course of action, but I can't change those things about me. It can't teach who I am. Sometimes failure teaches you a practical lesson about what to do or what not to do in a given situation. Sometimes it alters your path, closing down one opportunity and opening up another one that you hadn't seen before. Sometimes it forces you to become stronger because the only way out is through. When we learn to accept failure, we can come to terms with it and diminish its power to break us. And when we can learn to separate ourselves, our poor selves, from that failure, we can become free to move forward. If this, then, is how one should deal with failure, perhaps it is also how we should deal with the flip side of failure, success. After all, what is it about your achievement that makes you better than the person next to you? Is it you, or is it your actions that you should be proud of? If we can learn to stay positive in the face of failure, then surely we must equally learn to stay humble in the face of success. And that, I think, has been the most valuable lesson that my failures have taught me. Thank you.